crack at the door. Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to this live meeting of the Business Economy and Enterprise Scrutiny Board, which is taking place in line with the revised government regulations. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded. I'm Jenny Holmes, Scrutiny Coordinator. Present at today's meeting are the Chair of the Business Economy, Enterprise and Scrutiny Board, Councillor Mix, Councillor Hare, Councillor Heaven, Councillor Jandu, Councillor Lancaster. Cabinet members invited to the meeting are Councillor O'Boyle, Cabinet Member for Jobs and Regeneration, and Councillor Kevin Mayton, Cabinet Member for Education and Skills. Supporting the meeting is Michelle Salmon, the Governance Services Officer, and officers and representatives from Coventry and Warwickshire LEP will introduce themselves at the start of their presentation. I will now hand you over to the Chair, Councillor Mix. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Good afternoon and welcome. Firstly, I have a brief statement to make. Today's meeting of the Business Economy and Enterprise Scrutiny Board 3 takes place during a period of national mourning for His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh. During his long life of service, he visited Coventry on several occasions. Many in the city have taken the opportunity to pay their kind respects or have signed the online book of condolences, which remains available on the council website. The Lord Mayor and the leader of the council have expressed their sympathies, and I would like to also take this opportunity to extend our condolences to the Queen and her family during these difficult days ahead. So, in line with national guidance, our public services, including the work of this meeting, continues. Thank you. Okay, do we have any apologies or substitutions?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Rowan and Councillor Royce Ali, no substitutes. And we've also had an apology from the LEP Operations Director, Paula Dees. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, declarations of interest. Are there any? No, I don't think so. We have no hands up. Okay. Item 3, minutes, pages 3 to 16. We have two sets of minutes. Minutes of March 2021. Have committee had time to have a look at these? Can we agree them?
Move those, Chair.
Thank you. The second set of minutes of the joint meeting of the Business Enterprise Scrutiny Board 3 and the Finance and Corporate Services Scrutiny Board 1, which were held on the 24th of March. Can we agree these minutes?
Move those, Chair.
Thank you very much. Move the minutes. Right. Item 4, Coventry and Warwickshire's Local Enterprise Partnership. That's on pages 17 to 32. Now we have Councillor O'Boyle in his role as Coventry City's rep on the LEP board. Jim, do you have any comments before we start the presentation?
Thank you, Kath. We've got Kate Hughes. We're very pleased to have Kate Hughes with us today, Head of Strategy Engagement at CW LEP, who's going to take us through the presentation. The presentation gives a brief run through of both the economies of Coventry and Warwickshire, the issues obviously we've all had, and the LEP particularly have worked around with COVID, some of the projects and the business support that has happened over that period of time and previously. And of course, it then looks to the future, which we all are really looking forward to. Some of the opportunities, but also some of the projects that we're working on in order to support, our economy and businesses in the city and beyond. So really, that's the précis of the presentation. But Kate will take us through the main body of that. I'm sure I'll be here to take part in the discussion, answer any questions when members have them. So thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor O'Boyle. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jim. And I'm here this afternoon, Kate Hughes, Head of Strategy and Engagement at Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership, also with my colleague Andy Davis, who's our Strategy and Analytics Executive Officer. And thank you for the opportunity to come here again, as we do annually, to give you, as Jim said, an overview of the work of the CWLEP, which of course includes our Coventry and Warwickshire Growth Hub and also our Coventry and Warwickshire Champions Network as well. And I hope how this presentation, and hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at it, but as we go through it, will show how we can add value through our partnership working. And obviously with you as Coventry City Council, you've been incredibly supportive of the Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership over the years, and supportive really from our inception on day one, and have been very active in working with us in the partnership, not only through board members, but also through members of our business groups, and also seconding your trusted staff to support our executive team as well within the LEP. You obviously take the role as our accountable body, and we've got highly effective working with the capital programmes and project management teams within the council. And we feel that's showing now how consistently we've continued to achieve, and still are, even despite the circumstances we all find ourselves in now with our economy, but achieving those outputs and outcomes for our businesses, and obviously having impact positively on our residents and communities from those investment programmes that we're in charge of. And that shows the strength, as I say, I think, of our partnership working despite the challenges that, of course, we've been facing, not least through the restrictions and lockdowns because of COVID, but also in preparedness and getting ready for EU exit. And now as we find ourselves in tricky waters, potentially through EU exit, the transition. And of course, we have a very strong programme delivery board that supports us with that, and supported by well-defined and robust local assurance frameworks. And our investment programmes are annually subjected to independent evaluation of the Local Growth Fund programme particularly, and we face half-yearly and annual performance review through central government, through BEIS and our MHCLG. So moving on, let's just take a moment to reflect where we were in a pre-COVID situation. And I won't go through all the details of this slide, but I hope you can see through the highlighted statistics there. It's just to reaffirm that we were a very high performing economy. We had good growth. We had seen that over year on year, particularly as look at that stat of 110% over the decade. We had strong employment rates, we had low unemployment, and we had good average workplace earnings. And we held a top 10 growth position all the way since 2014. And as a LEP, we were also performance reviewed in terms of being one of the top 3 out of 38 LEPs nationwide. And this just serves to illustrate that strength in our economy pre-COVID. And we believe massively underpinned by the strength of that partnership working across our geography. And put here to remind us of what we want to return to, a new normal that takes us back to that kind of growth trajectory as we work on the challenges that we face today. So where are we now? And here are some of the statistics, and I know I'm very aware that members here will be updated fairly regularly on some of these statistics and some of the difficult positions that we find ourselves in terms of particularly those furloughed, and what the impact has had on many of our businesses and individuals' unemployment. But there are some positives, how much that we've been able to support through our cooperation with the local authority and with other business support agencies to get those loans and grants out to businesses so that they can survive through this difficult period, but also potentially also where they can pivot and be innovative to look to the future to, as I say, return to that particular trajectory of growth that we're all looking for. But we do know how we have been impacted, footfall in our city centre, claimant counts that of course we're expecting to jump further, unfortunately, as furlough comes to an end. So Some of these figures, as I say, I know that you're receiving regular updates on the economic analysis, but overall, of course, it's a somber picture. And we know again today, many will probably have heard through the media, that the Resolution Foundation again highlighted the disproportionate impact on young people and those in our BAME communities through unemployment from the pandemic. And I want to highlight just one thing on this slide particularly, and that's that final infographic on the right-hand side on CW Employment Solutions. This has been a major initiative for us through our Growth Hub and building on the platform that is Find It in Coventry and Warwickshire, and perhaps say a little bit more about that later. But this is a really practical tool, a website to assist with combating rising unemployment levels across our region. And it brings together employers, recruiters, job seekers and education leavers, and connecting them to find jobs, posting vacancies, and also assessing some of the support measures that have been implemented across the region to support continuing employment. In the latest stats, you'll see there that's a remarkable number of visits to that website. In fact, I know I've received some updated figures, and it's up to 27,500 visits to the website. And we're working with over 250 different companies with their recruitment, and working closely with the Department for Work and Pensions on various projects, including social care programmes. And we've helped deliver with the 3 LEP areas, the midlife MOT programme, the free online support that encourages people later in life, 40s, 50s and 60s, with planning around work, well-being and money, looking at their choices and on to future retirement. But we're also working really closely with University College Hospital, University Hospital Coventry and Warwickshire Trust, and both the universities. And there are a number of other local initiatives that we'll be aware of. The new Mega Lab in Leamington that we're supporting recruitment to the roles. The positive picture there is they're recruiting up to 950 people over the course of the next 3 months. And the COVID vaccination centre at Stoneleigh is being supported with roles on that site. And with the hospitals, again, working across 3 hospitals, up to 275 staff roles are also now being advertised. So working with a number of different organisations, with the Chamber, with you as a local authority, with our businesses, with organisations like HS2 to absolutely promote all sorts of employment opportunities for our residents and those people impacted most by the pandemic. So what else have we been doing as a LEP this last year? Of course, we've had to focus very much on our future strategy. What could we do to support people through this really, really difficult time? And what has come out of that work, with very much the support of a strong board, and our chair, particularly our outgoing chair. Now we have a new chair in Sarah Windrum, but our chair, Nick Abel, very passionately supportive of bringing together what we have termed our strategic reset framework, and a framework particularly such that we can be agile and continue to evolve the needs and be responsive to our business community over the course of this pandemic. There's a graphic on there on that slide which shows us that potential for further restrictions. We know as we've gone through successive lockdowns and the impact that that's had, we've had to be responsive and agile to adapt to those rapidly changing economic recovery environment. It's been very difficult, as we know, disproportionately difficult for some of our local sectors, and still we're only just coming now through where we're starting to see the unlocking, the reopening of some of the sectors like retail and hospitality and some of our leisure sector organisations, and there's still more to come. So we tried to set a framework, and we'll go on to how that framework is actually shaped. But what we're trying to show you here is how our board has set up a reset task force. It's comprised of the leadership out of all of our different business groups and our growth hub, and also our champions network. And this is an opportunity to really get that business voice into how we should shape this reset. We've termed it a reset. We haven't termed it a recovery plan. We think the new normal is going to be about growth, about further innovation, and actually catapult the region into a really, really good, strong economic position. So not going backwards, not just surviving, but actually leading to growth and future successes. We know that not all businesses potentially will survive. Some, as we know, have been devastated, but there are others that are being transformed, through greater digitization, drawing on innovation that's happening in other sectors, and diversifying products and services, and actually embracing the potential new market opportunities. And we want to champion those opportunities that will change the way our local economy can work, creating the environment for innovation and enterprise to flourish in the future. I said we need to be agile. That agility is really important, that we respond to changing conditions, and we feel developing this framework will allow us to do that. But overall, what we're trying to do is foster the right conditions to create the next generation jobs, look to a long-term future, create those innovative enterprises, give them the support they need, and be imaginative about new business models that can be sustained and sustainable over a longer period. Overall, we've taken a one Coventry and Warwickshire approach. We think that's the coherence of our economic geography, and we're absolutely in this for the long term. And through integration and consistency across the strategies of our partner organisations as well, we think the partnership's strong in being able to deliver these ambitions, and will drive our implementation of this strategic framework through the work of those business groups and our growth hub. And it gives us an opportunity. We see many of our partners are all represented on those business groups, but it does allow us to go further afield and draw in other expertise into some of the priority actions that we're taking forward. And we will continue to be informed by really good quality analysis from our growth hub, particularly of what that real business need is through their activities, through producing their smart region reports, on knowing exactly the temperature of business, the sentiment of business, what's happening on the ground, what those needs are, so that we can be entirely responsive and agile to adapt to that. Looking at the objectives overall and our reset principles and pillars, this just gives you hopefully just a quick overview of the kind of framing of our reset strategy, but all available online to be looked at in more detail. But we are really striving to see Coventry and Warwickshire as a safe and highly attractive place to live, study, work, and crucially for people to invest in for the long-term future. And you see our 7 reset principles along those green boxes along the slide there. As I've said, a fundamental reset of the economy, not just a return to where we were before. Fundamentally, we see every business having to look at itself as a new organisation in a new environment, and that's a challenge, but one we want to really support in that business community. We're building, of course, on sector strengths that we already have, but we're also trying to recalibrate our priorities around capital infrastructure and for revenue to enable support to look for those new innovative ideas and develop new market opportunities. We're looking at the longer term priorities, if reflected in a really robust project pipeline that we're ready for future investment and funding opportunities. But we're also looking at what productivity really means and reimagining that in the sense of what that's going to look like to increase productivity within our companies and across our communities going further forward, with new approaches to workforce health and well-being, so critical to that issue of productivity going forward, and as we're all acutely aware. And of course, to be very mindful of that green and sustainable future that we're all striving for in a net zero carbon economy. And you see along the bottom there the 6 core pillars of our strategy: good jobs and creating levelling up opportunities, not just any jobs, but making sure they're good quality jobs and they reach the right people in our communities. Leading on innovation, very much a track record of our Coventry and Warwickshire economy. ensuring a green sustainable future and our green credentials in all that we do, taking new and innovative, bold and approaches to enterprise, new business models, as I've said, that will be sustained throughout the new environments that we're going to be operating in, and looking to reimagine our communities both at home, but also how we can forge those global international connections that may increase our trade, our profile around the world and create new opportunities, and continuing to transform infrastructure, whether that's physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure, that will support a continued and vibrant economy going forward. The next slide. This really is quite busy and totally accept that, but what we're trying to show here is how our implementation plan, now published on our website also, is being led through our different business groups. And there's some highlights there just of some of the priority projects that we are currently engaged with and driving forward through the work of those business groups. And you'll see right at the top there on the left on our productivity and skills group, we've mentioned there the Find It in Coventry and Warwickshire Employment Solutions job vacancy portal that I mentioned earlier. But that Find It in Coventry and Warwickshire platform is helping to highlight a number of opportunities, also not just in recruitment terms, but also in contract terms, for our businesses to be able to find new opportunities to boost their businesses locally and to develop more of our local supply chains. And at the moment, that platform's got over 2,600 members. And we are looking also with chamber members that are part of that too, in cooperation across our growth hub with the Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber of Commerce. And we currently have, just to give you a flavour, 58 live opportunities there of a value of over £3 billion worth of activity. And in total, the value of the opportunities posted on that platform have been over £20 billion. There is work out there, and we're trying to do our best to promote that to our local businesses and really show the attractiveness of what's happening in our region, and made contributors to those opportunities across the City Council and other local authority partners across the region and slightly wider across the West Midlands. We've got both our universities on there. We've got Midland Heart, we've got the Commonwealth Games Organising Committee, HS2, Scanscope. We've got various organisations promoting opportunities that will lead to our own businesses on our patch taking advantage of those. I'm not going to go through all the rest of those opportunities there, so rather some of the priorities that we're working on, but just to quickly highlight a couple. A Made Smarter initiative that we're involved with in terms of manufacturing, the peer-to-peer networks that are supporting leadership across different organisations to develop their businesses in these difficult times. The fact that we look to our Growing Places Fund to repurpose the Duplex Fund, which has been offered through CWRT to offer an additional loan scheme throughout to companies who missed out on other forms of loan and support during the pandemic, of which £2 million worth of Growing Places funding has been offered out to loans to businesses. We're active in the electrification task force, and we're focusing very much on how future electrification skills can be developed for our local businesses, and also for those future businesses that may cluster around the development of electrification and electric vehicles in our region. And also, just perhaps one other thing, power generation study, you'll see towards the bottom of that slide on the right hand side, something where we have been convening partners to develop a power assistance service so that we can help developers who are looking to come to the region to develop and unlock employment sites where we know we already have some issues around power supply, so that we can help to promote and, as I say, unlock those opportunities for new business to survive and thrive here without being constrained by what could be infrastructure issues around power. So moving on, Just to give you a flavour, you see there's a number of case studies here that will be very familiar to all members of the committee here, of the board. But a case study which shows how we've used our Getting Building Fund allocations to support a number of linked projects around cultural capital across Coventry and readiness, very much so for launching of the City of Culture. We won over £11.7 million worth of Getting Building Fund from government late last year. It's been a complicated process. We only just heard this week that we have everything contracted now, but those are very significant projects. 6.1 million of that Getting Building Fund allocated to the cultural capital across Coventry. And similarly, you will be familiar with the Coventry Station Master Plan, which has seen 2.75 million of growth deal funding allocated. Really now, particularly over the last week or two, seeing even more images around how this is really coming to shape up. Tremendous project that is a real showcase to welcome people to our city, particularly again ahead of the City of Culture. And Coventry Very Light Rail was also supported by the LEP through growth deal funding, but additionally, another 1.76 million of that Getting Building Fund capital funding that was allocated last year. A tremendous and very well thought of project, a lot of interest from our government colleagues in BEIS and MHCLG when we talk about Very Light Rail. So we're looking forward to that being launched very, very soon. Moving on. You will recall, of course, how we have worked together both with the City Council across the LEP and very much with WMG at the University of Warwick to support the development of the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre. Now getting opening and active, a difficult period obviously during the pandemic to get all the equipment commissioned, but very much at the heart of our innovation landscape. And the first of its kind in our country, this nearly £130 million facility developed now close to Coventry Airport. But wanted to stress there, very much a learning factory. There's very much about skills development alongside both the technological and innovation development here, but very much also an underpinning piece and showing as a national facility, but how it's being built up very much through our local partnership working and expertise. And that leads us to looking ahead, and particularly one of the key elements of electrification and driving that electrification revolution, and how we are taking in this region such a leading role to deliver this through the electrification task force that I've mentioned, chaired by Margot James, head of WMG, how we're looking at skills requirements and the potential for a skills summit as a result of the work that we're doing. But of course, a key prize for this region would be to secure that gigafactory, the picture of which CGI is there at the bottom of the page. So what is next? Where are we going? The reset of the economy, of course, whilst we live through and learn to live with COVID-19 and its impacts, we are looking to continue the really rapid and robust implementation of our One Coventry and Warwickshire strategic reset framework across jobs, skills, innovation, and of course our net zero agenda. With the budget came different funds, but also the demise of the industrial strategy and the local industrial strategy approaches that we have been working with colleagues across the region. But of course, we have a new plan from government, and we will need to be working on those agenda, as we say, job, skills, innovation, and of course the green agenda going forward. So we have the continued impact and implications of the end of EU transition that we're still monitoring very significantly. Still more to understand and how that's affecting our businesses and how we can support them through that for the longer term. We're working, of course, with you as a local authority and our other partners around how we can support the rounds of funding in terms of levelling up funding, and looking forward around community funds that will be the precursor potentially in this pilot year before we see UK shared prosperity funds flow that will replace what were the European structural funds. And of course, as a LEP, we are subject to a review that we're all the LEP network across the country is facing a forthcoming review. We don't have the final terms of reference for that review yet, but that we expect to be imminently announced. But we're working as a national network, and I have colleagues, and particularly Paul Urdiz, who couldn't be with us today, but is very instrumental in working with the leaders of that LEP network and working with government on how the shape of that review will work. But of course, we're maintaining delivery. We put delivery, delivery, delivery. That's what we're all about. We're coming to the end of our local growth fund round of over £140 million worth of delivery projects. And we're looking still, obviously, at the active delivery of those getting building fund projects on very tight timescales with this in this coming year. So we are absolutely focused on delivering all of the outputs and outcomes from those programmes, be they jobs, homes, commercial space, etc. We may take longer to see the delivery of those, obviously subject to some of the COVID restrictions, but we will be spent, we are deployed and defrayed in terms of those programmes on a good trajectory with getting building fund projects too, and we will ensure they have the maximum possible impact on our region and on our economy. And of course, we're increasingly playing a role within those massive opportunities for us, despite some of the issues that we've had to face and some of the restrictions, but with City of Culture and looking forward to Commonwealth Games. And it puts us in a very strong, very unique position to be able to attract continued investment to this region, and we hope and we achieve that recovery going forward. And finally, very much about continued collaboration and having influence. We work very closely, as I say, with our LEP across our LEP family, with the Growth Hub, with our network of champions, which has been very strong despite some of the difficulties our champions themselves and businesses have faced. But with, of course, with all our local authority and business support agency and other partners in FE and HE across Coventry and Warwickshire going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, for that very informative presentation. There's lots of information in there for sure. Okay, Councillor Boyle, do you want to just come in before I go over to members and pick up on any of that?
Thank you, Catherine. Let's get to questions and comments. Kate has done a wonderful job there, and I'm sure there's plenty of colleagues want to come on in now. So I'll sit back and wait for the question.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we have Councillor Mayton first. Councillor Mayton?
Yep, thanks so much. Just two things really. First one is a comment, and I have to say that it's praiseworthy for Coventry and Warwickshire champions when they've come through doing it remotely. The quality of the speakers and the points that they're making, which are lessons for all of us. I mean, I remember in particular, you do seem to be very good at getting women who've come through a variety of things and who are at various levels. But I remember a young apprentice who was talking about that, but also that's people who are in chief executives positions who have gone around the world and sort of now talking about Coventry. And I think it would be good to try and actually compile some of the points that are made through the champions, because not enough people know about it, and not enough people, I think, taking on the points that come from that. But I have to say, I think the quality of the speakers has been very good. The second thing is really just a question about, and we've talked a lot about skills and what's proposed for the future. So it's not so much about what skills, it's about the capacity in the sub-region to be able to deliver those skills. Obviously, we're in a strong position with our two universities and colleges, but are there any gaps? Are there reports that are coming from the businesses that are being talked to about either the programs that are in operation, but also the capacity of local organisations to deliver that training, which will be absolutely essential. That's whether it's apprenticeships or people in their 50s and 60s who are retraining. That's the question.
Thank you, Councillor Mayton. You pinched one of my questions. I'll leave that for you to answer, Kate.
Thank you, Councillor Mayton, Councillor Mix. That's a really interesting comment about what we're receiving through from businesses. I think there's, we do a huge amount of analysis and very specifically through the Growth Hub on the needs of our local businesses, and I think we will be capturing exactly that and doing that kind of mapping through our productivity and skills group as well. That's led by Marion Plant, and she also chairs our Reset task force. So it's absolutely so important to us to ensure we can actually deliver. I take your point entirely about capacity. So we will be, I know, scrutinising very much in sense of returns from our businesses as to the skills needs, but also, as you say, those capacity issues as well. And looking forward to, as we've said, things like electrification and what new skills, new generation skills we'll be looking for, and how we can look to future funding opportunities, and not least things like the revenue funding, hopefully coming through the new UK Shared Prosperity Fund to support that, and other forms of funding as well. So definitely taking that on board.
Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Mayton?
No, that's fine. That's good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Hi there. I just wanted to declare an interest. So there's a bit of family noise in the background. I do apologise. I just wanted to declare an interest that I am a member of the Culture and Tourism Business Group of CWLEP. So I will refrain from making any comments or questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Vali. Any other members have any other questions for Kate? Kate, I'll ask one myself. You speak about re-imaging our communities and forging global connections. How do you feel with what's happened now with COVID? How restrictive to working in communities, and plus trying to have work with the global visage, and like you say, you're going into Reset. It's very impressive, your work, but there are so many still uncertainties, and I just wondered how you'll forge connections globally, and then how you'll work in the communities.
Thank you, Councillor Mick. I think I missed you're just cutting in and out a little bit, so I'll try and answer if it's not appropriate.
Sorry.
Please do come back at me. No problem at all. I think you're right to pick that up in the sense of what we're doing globally and internationally. I think we are doing like a lot of our businesses are. We're trying to embrace particularly digital technologies and different forms of communication. I think we're taking a very proactive view across our partnership to that whole inward investment piece as well, so that people are seeing what the potential offer is of our region and our sub-region, and removing, shall I say, any barriers to coming here to do business, to invest. So promoting what we have, and particularly our skills base, of course, but equally our infrastructure and our supporting ecosystem, if you like, that will make it the best place genuinely for people to want to come here to do business, and that we're very receptive to that. And we see that as very much integrating with what we can do also locally within our communities. So it is a real challenge on communications right now, and even what Councillor Mayton was very kindly saying about our champions, those are our own business leaders, and they are our advocates within their own communities as well, and how we can pull people together to really keep people connected and keep people part of that positive future. There's part of what COVID's done is there have been, albeit in a sense, kind of winners and losers, haven't there? And it's a mixed picture. It's a mixed picture in sectors, in businesses, in different communities, and actually being positive and helping to, still be very aspirational, I think is important for us, and to take the opportunities as they present themselves.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Boyle.
Just to add to that, because it's quite a question really, and could cover a whole range of topics, but I just put perspective into this really, in the sense that whilst we've seen, I think the economy may well have grown again in February, it's still something like 8% lower than it was, smaller than it was in March 2020. So we've got a massive mountain to climb in order to get back nationally the wealth that the country has lost as a whole. And whilst Coventry and Warwickshire's economy, relatively speaking, was healthy prior to COVID, and it's all obviously dependent upon your point of view in some regards as to what you regard as a healthy economy, both regionally and nationally. But put that to one side for now. Of course, added to that Brexit, and we know that there's been issues around difficulties with both import and export since January the 1st, and the extra burden that has put on businesses in order to both keep up their opportunities with either existing customers or seeking new customers within Europe. That has proved problematic. But here's the point. Kate mentioned in the presentation that there is a review of LEPs across the country by the government. We don't know what that form will take. However, I make this point, clearly LEPs are one of the main arms, if you like, of the government strategy when it comes to supporting business and actually having businesses' voice within their economic priorities and policies. And with Brexit, meaning that you've heard government ministers talk about seeking opportunities outside of Europe. It's a big, wide world out there. We will have further opportunities to make deals, to make trade deals with countries that we couldn't otherwise make when we were part of the European Union. Well, this is going to be really the acid test now in the next sort of 2 years, because as well as the fact that we're slowly coming out of COVID, and we will come out of it, there's no doubt about that, and we will get back to normal. There'll be no new normal. It will be normal. I'll make that point. But clearly, with our economy smaller than it was, the biggest drop in the economy in 300 years, we've got a massive job. And the government are going to have to come up with something amazing if they're then going to do away with LEPs, which has been the rumour, and actually what they're going to replace it with, when at the same time in Coventry and Warwickshire, we've got loads of multinational companies here who do business all over the world. I thought they want to embrace them and work with them to understand how it is they've achieved some of the imports or some of the economic investment in our area, and how we can replicate that abroad. And that is going to be the real test. What we can't do now is after the last recession, the government retrenched and pulled the anchors up in effect, or dropped the anchors, depends how you look at it, and pulled everything in, and actually stopped spending. And we just can't afford to do that, because if we do that, our economy will be stuck in an austerity death spiral for another 10 years. That's what we've got. We started COVID in a worse position than we were 10 years ago. The last thing we want to do is repeat those mistakes. So we've got to work with all our different partners. So it's a massive job, and we need everybody on board. But I just wanted to make that point, Catherine.
Thank you, Councillor O'Boyle. We are in Purdah. Please watch your comments. Kate, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to make what we do know, or what's come through to us in terms of that LEP review as positives, and I'm kind of quoting from some of the things that have been said to us, but this is about policy change, not about performance of LEPs. That's been made very strong to us, and it will be an evolution, not an extinction. That's also been quoted back to us. So I think we know that they want to continue to harness the capacity of business to secure economic recovery. So seeing business innovation, as so critical to that, I think is really important. So we feel quite confident, I think, in the sense of, as Jim said, about how we've developed that over the years through the partnership working. So we see it as a phase of evolution, and we will be here but stronger, possibly called something else. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think you do amazing work, and lots of companies in collaboration. Can I just ask, what have you seen because of the lockdown? We've had a lot of online shopping and things like that. So manufacturing was, you said, I believe, something at about 110%. So how do you see moving forward? Coping with, like you said, businesses that won't come back, especially in manufacturing, because we can get it online easier.
Yes, thank you. I think, obviously, as I said, there's a mixed picture, isn't there? That some people have done remarkably well. They've adopted digitally to embrace online marketing and promotion and distribution, etc., of goods. What we are seeing in the manufacturing sector is also a lot of pivoting, not least if we go way back to the beginning of the COVID crisis and how some of our local manufacturers moved into the supply of PPE, for instance. So those haven't necessarily been one-off activities. These have continued. People have been remarkably resilient and creative, actually, in terms of what they've been able to look to in terms of their own manufacturing performance. And what I think we're seeing is a move away from sort of rigid, if you like, traditional sort of sector boundaries, but actually it's all merging. There's much more crossovers, if you like, spillover effects that are happening, that people are now seeing opportunities where they can literally pivot their business and take manufacturing into a different place. We won't move away from that in this region. It's still strong. As Jim said, there are a lot of challenges in terms of trade that we know and have not settled down. Things aren't all as they should be yet in terms of both our relationship with Europe, but actually people forging wider relationships with the rest of the world. So I think it's still a mixed picture. We still look to provide the kind of support we can with those businesses making difficult decisions around how they operate going forward. We've seen the impact of retail. Retail was in a bad place before the pandemic on the high street. We're seeing now, a kind of resurgence of independence and how I've been doing some work. We've been working with the combined authority on looking at some of the impacts on sectors, logistics particularly, as well as automotive, but retail and hospitality. And actually the shifting sands on that is going to mean a very different kind of profile of some of our business and traditional, we'll probably call value chains rather than sectors, and the creation of new kind of supply chains as well. Relationships burgeoning with the hospitals, for instance, locally, that are leading to stronger local supply chains. This is positive, but it does mean that there's been significant change and impact on some businesses. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. I'm very grateful for all that information. Committee members, are there any more questions? I can't see any more hands up at the moment. So we thank you for that, Kate, and we'll look to good luck with your reset.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go to recommendation. Sorry.
That's exactly what I was just about to say, Chair.
What recommendations?
The recommendations, yes.
Perfect. Okay, the Business Economy and Enterprise Scrutiny Board 3 are recommended to consider the content of the presentation at the appendix, and 2, identify any other recommendations to Council Representative, which would be Councillor O'Boyle on the left. So are members happy with that? Yep, seems to be no. Yep. Okay, Jenny, we'll put that down as our recommendation, and thank you. Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you, Kate, and we'll see you in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to item 5 now, Public Sector Carbonisation Scheme Update. Okay, Councillor O'Boyle and Councillor Mayton, would you like to comment before we go into the presentation, which should be with Lowell Lewis? Councillor O'Boyle.
Yeah, cheers, Catherine. It is with Lowell. I mean, really, it's a paper, just if you like, an update on exactly the local authorities decarbonisation scheme, and identifies, you know, the buildings and the projects as part of that, and the actual money from the various grants that have been received and how they've been dealt with, really. So it's in the paper. I'm sure Lowell will take us through all of that. I'm sure it may generate some interest.
Thank you for that, Councillor O'Boyle. Councillor Mayton, your name's down on this. Do you wish to comment before we go into the presentation? No? Okay, over to Lowell Lewis.
Good afternoon all. I'm Lowell Lewis. I'm the CQ manager in the facilities management department of Coventry City Council. So energy and efficiency of our property estate falls within sort of my remit. So obviously we're doing a presentation today to update you on how we've gone with the public sector decarbonisation scheme that was first taken into sort of cabinet approval back in November now, for a decision in December. So just to give a quick introduction into what the public sector decarbonisation scheme, or PSDS scheme, is about. It was a unprecedented announcement of grant funding by the government through the Department of Bays for £1 billion of grant funding to be given to public sector building retrofit projects. So this was to look at existing public sector buildings across the whole country, and how to improve their energy efficiency through retrofit schemes. So the ultimate aim was to encourage green growth throughout the public sector, to really sort of build back better, as the scheme was labelled. So the scheme itself was able to offer up to 100% grants for eligible measures, and I'll come on to what eligible measures kind of means a bit later. And the funding for the bids had to be in by the 11th of January earlier this year. So it was a very short window. It was only announced on the 1st of October. So it was a really short, sharp sort of financial intervention by the government. All projects to be delivered through that scheme have the target objective of being completed by the end of September this year. So it was a very short application window, a very short delivery window as well. It was really about getting that £1 billion spent in the economy to support a green growth off the back of COVID. So eligible measures, which is the kind of the core fundament part of the scheme, it touched across 4 different categories. The first one, which was their primary one, is about low carbon heating. So this was the government identifying and acknowledging that in the scheme of decarbonising the UK, the heating of our buildings is one of the most difficult areas to tackle. So that was given the sort of highest priority in the eligible measures round. Other measures, such as lighting improvements or general insulation improvements, they kind of fell into category 2, which are your general energy efficiency measures that we're all quite familiar with. Category 3 was an interesting addition that was added after a lot of interaction with lots of local authorities and other stakeholders in the country about the need for the need for additional measures that support decarbonisation, but maybe don't reduce carbon emissions directly themselves. So a really key example of that one is around battery storage technology. So battery storage technology enables us to use renewable energy at different times of the day when it's needed rather than when it's generated. So whilst it's not in itself saving carbon, it's enabling the furthering of carbon saving measures of the use of renewable energy such as wind and solar. And then the final category which was added was category 4, is around fossil fuel replacement of oil and coal. So this was a nod to the fact that some areas of the country still have a strong dependency on coal, and switching that from coal to gas as an interim measure would still be of benefit to the environment. So these measures, the category 4 measures, were really targeting at those most dirty of power sources, and trying to assist with those to be cleaned up. But they were very, very prescriptive in terms of what would be allowed and what not, what wouldn't be allowed. So beyond that, the funding was a bit unique in the fact that it didn't have a financial payback criteria as such. So a traditional business as usual approach, assessing projects on their financial viability, wasn't critical. It was focused on the carbon saving potential of the project. So whilst there was also no match funding requirement as part of this grant, subject to a criteria of £500 for every tonne of carbon saved in the lifetime of the project. So that lifetime of a project could vary significantly from measure to measure, with something like insulation, which might have a 30-year life, whereas other measures like a controller, a lighting controller, might only have 7 or 8 years of life expectancy. So it did give you a lot of flexibility in looking at what measures you could pull in under that criteria, but you could deliver projects above that criteria as long as if you provided match funding. There was no maximum grant value for the bids, but there was a limit on the overall scheme of £1 billion. The final bit of eligibility and understanding of the scheme was around what they defined as a public building, and this was quite contentious when it was initially sort of proposed, but it slowly unravelled as to make it clearer with additional updates. And essentially what it came down to is, as long as it's a public building, but it's not operated by charities or voluntary organisations, they fell out. But otherwise, as long as it had a building that was local authority owned and operated, delivering a public service, whether it be administrative or service led, they all fell into scope eventually. In terms of Coventry City Council, our bids, we made 2 bids in the end. So an initial bid was developed from the start of October, when the funding rules were announced, and that was focused on our corporate properties, are the ones that I manage the energy for, and had the greatest knowledge about. So we developed a scheme looking at our top sort of emitting buildings, the ones that contribute most to our carbon emissions, as potential candidates for projects, identified what level of projects, and we came with a scheme up to about £6 million worth of value, which we call bid 1. Further, we managed to secure some additional support through Greener Energy Futures as a consultant to come in and look at primary school improvements as well. This was because we didn't have the ability to do that in-house in the time frame, so we looked to bring in additional resource to try and pull together a second bid, looking just at the education estate. That was done, and a bid around £2.4 million was proposed, and we managed to get that submitted by that 11th of January deadline. Subsequently, we've then found that so in PSDS phase 1, that £1 billion was incredibly sought after, and overall £2.4 billion of bids were submitted to the scheme. So quite clearly, not every bid was going to be successful. We were happily confirmed we were successful in bid 1 for our £6 million corporate proposal. However, we were told we were unsuccessful with the schools. However, following some changes in the grant delivery, we were able process, we were subsequently awarded funding for our second bid as well, due to other grants not being claimed ahead of the deadlines, and we as a local authority had met our deadlines, and therefore we were able to take advantage of that second grant offering to take our total grant to £8.5 million. So just to go into the two bids a little bit more detail. So bid one, which was our corporate properties, we're looking at 29 locations across our portfolio of around about 100 odd buildings. Now these properties make up roughly about 3/4 of our carbon emissions overall. Within those properties, we identified 127 eligible measures, and they're shown on the right hand side of the slide. In terms of number of projects in each one and the kind of split of where the grant funding was to be spent across that just over £6 million grant. So some of them are quite innovative, others are more standard. So you've got the low carbon heating, which was the category 1 projects, takes the largest share of the grant because that was the focus of it. So the £2 million sort of set aside for heat pumps and electric heating projects. The more traditional measures such as lighting improvements and insulation, draft proofing that help the fabric of the building, they are your category 2 measures and make up another significant proportion of that 6 million. Final section were those innovative supporting projects in category 3, and for this area we got a significant amount of funding in battery storage. It's sort of a £1.5 million worth of battery storage projects that will really act as the innovation part of this overall scheme. Target carbon saving for this project was 473 tonnes of carbon a year. That's what we're hoping to achieve through the delivery of this project. And there will be, although it's not a core element of this project, there will be a small financial saving that the council should also be able to benefit from as an output of this project. For bid 2, it was very similar. It's a much smaller remit in the fact that we're only looking at 7 schools, but there's a lot more measures focused on each of those schools. So there's 49 measures across those 7 locations that were proposed, roughly spend of just under £2.5 million. The target is to achieve around 300 tonnes of carbon savings a year across those 7 schools. And there will be, again, some financial saving, hopefully, for each of those schools. The remit was slightly different in terms of schools. What we were trying to do with the consultant was for them to identify schools that had the ability to take near-term measures that would save carbon, but still deliver on a site-by-site basis a positive contribution to schools' budgets. So we didn't want to progress with projects that would see additional financial burden being placed on the operation of a school, even at the expense of carbon. So it had to be carefully balanced to make sure that not only were we saving carbon, but the school would see a positive outcome financially from delivering some of these from their collective projects. So that's bid 2, and I think that brings us to the end of our presentation on the bid scheme.
Thank you, Elle. That's very interesting. Okay, Councillor, hang on a moment. Councillor O'Boyle or Councillor Naton, do you have any comments before I go over to Councillor Ruan?
Thank you, Catherine. It's in the presentation. I presented a cabinet paper on this some time ago where we identified some of these works. So I've gone through them before, but I'm sure there's some questions.
Thank you, Councillor O'Boyle. Councillor Ruan.
Thanks, Kath. Yeah, my question's just around the bid 2. around the 7 locations. Are we saying the 7 locations are 7 primary schools? I just want clarification on that. And if it is, why was the bid not opened up to more primary schools or possibly secondary schools? Because I suppose what would be helpful is just to have a breakdown of the council's actual estate and actually understanding what work is necessary for completion. I know you're up against the clock with regards to submitting funding bids, etc. But as we all know, the green agenda isn't going away. So it's sort of asking the question of having future bids worked up, ready to go, that sort of thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Lowell?
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the bid 2 for the schools, it was a very, very short term turnaround on this one. I think we had a total of 14 days to try and pull something together. So this was why we brought in the consultant to support on it. They started with the remit of it had to be a maintained school because the funding only allowed for local authorities to bid for maintained schools directly, and academy trusts would have to have submitted their own bid directly to the scheme in their own name. So we just couldn't bid for money on their behalf, was the problem. So that changed. That's why none of the secondary schools are included. So the remit then started with I think there's 53 maintained primary schools. The consultant then sat down with the education estates team and the conditions team to run through, over those 14 days, to run through the prioritising those schools in terms of those which could have measures delivered in the available time frame that would meet the criteria of the funding. And that's how I think 9 schools in the end were brought up at the start as sort of best cases for doing works at. In the final sort of iteration of the bid and working it out, making sure it was an eligible bid, that's why it ended up with just the 7. It's an incredibly tight time frame, and at the moment it's desktop, and we're moving through over the next 6 months into the formal finalising of these schemes. So at the moment, for example, there are people in these 7 schools, 7 primary schools, doing surveys this week to bottom out, is this actually the right school to be doing that project at?
Oh, sorry. Councillor Ruan, you want to come back?
Yeah, it was just a better understanding of how we came to submit a bid with only 14 days, because, you know, this was announced sort of, I can't give you the timescales, but I mean, I was aware of this scheme because I know that we raised it at a scrutiny board meeting whenever it was. But that's by the by. What I'm trying to get at is, how do we come to a sort of future bidding process of scoping out all the primary schools that are eligible, therefore we submit a bid that isn't rushed, and that we actually maximise a bid. You know, we know that the government are throwing money at a lot of capital schemes at the moment, and it's just making sure that we've got the capacity and opportunity to submit those bids. So, you know, my question comes back to, we know that the green agenda isn't going away. What future opportunities are there to submit bids, and will we have shovel-ready projects to submit? And was there any scope, I suppose, with the consultant, who would have been paid very well, I'm sure, to sort of get more consultants involved in submitting a larger bid at the time? I know, as you say, 14 days was a short period to do that, but was there any opportunity? Because I know it was done through, is it Salix Finance, which is obviously consultants who are paid to do that. So that's my long-winded question, because personally, I think we could have maximised the bid a lot more on this one, because we did have months in advance. It wasn't just 14 days, but yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Ruan. Hello?
Yes, so just in terms of the consultant, so we didn't have any budget to pay for consultancy on this, so we were limited with internal resource. So and education didn't have the education officers didn't have a resource. It's not we our condition reports are condition, not energy based. So whilst we knew from October that the funding was available, they asked me to find support for them to submit a bid. We applied to Salix for funding to support that support and to fund the consultant. They initially came back in November. We applied on the 7th of October, I think, for that support. They responded in November saying we wouldn't get that support. They subsequently changed their mind and on the 14th of December gave us the money for the consultancy support, which is why we ended up with only the 14 days to turn it around over Christmas. Unfortunately, we just didn't have it wasn't in our program of spend to work up these projects. Now the hope is, obviously we went to cabinet recently in last month in March to get permission to submit further bids for schools as part of the phase 2 expected phase 2 scheme of this PSDS scheme, which was granted. That scheme came available on the 7th of April. However, the government has significantly changed the criteria for the second phase and reduced the amount of funding available down to just 70 million. And it's particularly focused on district heat networks. So therefore, we haven't got any shovel-ready projects again for phase 2, but is something that we are now, as part of the condition assessment, is looking at, well, which other schools, what are the next 7 schools, and how can we start building a strategy of how do we target all schools by the by 2030, 2040, or whenever we need to. So that's with I've supported by getting that feedback into the education officers for them to sort of develop in their capital strategy going forward.
Thank you, Lo. Councillor Ruan, would you like to come back on that?
No, that's fine. That's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other members with questions on this? Okay, well, I do. Lo, I wonder if you can tell me, we have a number of projects listed up there. We know the grant value. So do we have a list available for members to have a look at where this money, which properties it went to, like who got heating controls, light replacements, anything like that, so that we could have a look at?
We do at the moment. The schools are still, as I said, in desktop. So until the projects are finalised, the spend is still a bit in flux until we get all of the respondents back. But once we have that, I'm happy to share the list of where those projects go forward.
I think it would be advantageous for members to be aware of, rather than just see a number of projects and a value, who actually got it, and maybe a reason why them than others. Is that all right?
Yep, that's fine. Yep, as soon as we've got them all finalised, we can issue that sort of as an update to members.
That would be perfect, an update for members of this board. Thank you very much. Councillor Hare, I believe.
Yes, Chair, Kath.
Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
My question is to Mr. Lewis. He says grant funding for building, battery storage, fossil fuel, and match funding. Can you bit open up what match funding mean? I didn't understand, but can you clarify in more detail match funding, please?
Yes, sure. So in most funding requirements, things like the EU funding, there is a match requirement. So whilst they would give you a grant for 50% of the project cost, you would have to match that funding with your own money of 50%. In this scheme, it was 100% grant, so you didn't have to provide any of your own finance towards the project. So that's what the match funding meant.
Thank you, Lewis.
Anything else, Councillor Hare?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Okay. So do any other members have any questions? So who will answer? I don't know whether it's going to come from our climate change officer, Brett Willers. How do we feel this amount of money and projects are really, sustainable, for the future? I mean, it doesn't seem a lot of funding, especially when we've got, climate change, and we really need to be invested in improving our building. Okay, Councillor O'Boyle.
Yeah, I think that's a wider question, Catherine, because of course this, as Lowell has gone to quite some detail to explain the technicalities of bidding for various funding for specific schemes for specific type of buildings. Because what we're talking about here, just to be clear, the question that Ed asked was specifically about school buildings. That was dealt with through the Education Department. However, clearly, the previous report that is identified in the papers today, presented to scrutiny, the cabinet reports, it does identify as well the specific projects, the amounts of money, specifically for the estate that the local authority has as a whole outside of the school buildings. And some of those, for example, will be the council house. Some of it will be for the Frygate building. I know that the battery storage will be identified there as well. So that there are a number of schemes. In terms of the general question, though, this is just to say a snapshot of one project of a whole host of different ways of tackling climate change. And I know that myself and Brett are due to go to scrutiny coordination. I think it's next week, where there's a presentation. I know you'll be there, Catherine, as the chair of this meeting. So we'll have an opportunity to go through the whole remit of the climate change and sustainability agenda, which is pretty exciting, and will really lay out some of the priorities and policies that we are pursuing in order to get ahead of the game there. So just bear with us on that, because that is something we'll be coming to next week, Kath.
I appreciate that, Councillor O'Boyle. It's just getting some meat on the bone, and I know that we're doing an awful lot, but that's good. Thank you. Anybody else got any more questions? Nope. Okay, we'll go to the recommendations. Recommendation: the Business, Economy and Enterprise Scrutiny Board 3 are recommended to note the work undertaken to date to secure funding under the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme Grant Award. 2, support the progress made in the delivery of the initiatives for which funding has been secured. And thank you, Lowell, that was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Going to be moving on now.
Move that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, on to the work programme, Jenny.
So you can see the work programme as it stands. It was in the meeting pack for you. Obviously, there are some items which will be carried forward because today's the last meeting of this municipal year. So obviously those outstanding items will be taken forward to be considered as part of the work programme for next year's scrutiny board.
Councillor Ruan, you have questions?
Yeah, just a question. Just as a follow-up, really, from the paper that Jenny sent out to the whole board following the last budget. It was really just to, I suppose, get an answer from yourself and others in terms of, so following the budget announcement, how is it that we as a council are then applying for those fundings in terms of, so you've got, for example, the Levelling Up Fund, which is 20 million quid for each local authority. You've got the UK Community Renewal Fund. So what I wasn't after was just a generic sort of, this is the budget and these are the funding grants available. It was more of, and how is Coventry benefiting and how is Coventry submitting bids, etc. That's what I was wanting, and that would then automatically come to the scrutiny board in terms of knowing what the bid is, when we're going to submit the bid, because there are several capital investment programmes that the government are throwing a lot of money at, and it's just having an idea of what those bids are. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ruan. I think we can supply additional information to the board on this, can we, Jenny?
I can ask the officers for that information if it's available, but we could always put an item on the work programme to look at external funding, particularly around capital funding, if that's what the board wanted to do.
I think so. Come back, Councillor Ruan.
Yeah, I suppose because of the slow and cumbersome way that, you know, the council's governance structure operates, it's basically just trying to know whether it's just via a briefing note to say, this is what we're looking to do, these are the things that we're scoping out, and these are the grants that we're interested in expressing an application in. That's all because I suppose what I'm highlighting is with regard to the public sector decarbonisation scheme. Now, I know that these schemes are coming thick and fast, but you know, there's only a finite amount of money, and it's just ensuring that we're maximising it. So the Levelling Up Fund, for example, is as I've said, a £20 million scheme per local authority. I know that the timeline, I think, on that is around June, and I know that the UK Community Renewal Fund is also June, and that's a maximum of £3 million. So, you know, waiting till the next scrutiny board meeting, whenever that'll be, will be too late. So it's really just to get a quicker turnaround on how we as an authority are looking to maximise these bids. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Ruan, I'm quite happy for any of that information. Jenny, if you'd make some notes so that the committee, because like Councillor Ruan is saying, you know, we don't know when the next scrutiny board will be. So since we've had this at my scrutiny board is an additional meeting, I think we'll make a note of what Councillor Ruan wants, and then when the information's available, I don't see why we can't send it out to the board. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just thought on the suggested items, and we've got Gigafactory there. Could we combine that with Coventry Airport? Because obviously the master plan is for the airport to be changed to a gigafactory. So that's obviously dependent on whether we are successful with getting the gigafactory. So you know, that's not necessarily guaranteed. I hope it does happen. I'm sure we've got the best case to the government, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will happen. And also in terms of the very light rail, I think that's something we should again revisit as a progress update on for the next municipal year, and whether it should be under the badge of integrated transport. So I can see cycling strategy on there, but when I talk about integrated strategy, I mean very light rail, bus, other public transport, walking, to try and sort of move away from cars. So what's our sort of strategy and update on that?
No, Councillor Singh, I'm very happy for you to bring anything like that up, because that's what board members are there for, to suggest anything that we need to pass on to whomever chairs this meeting, so that you have the information you want. So Jenny, have we made a note of those?
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I've made a note of those.
Perfect. Councillor Singh will make sure that that goes onto the work programme and the members have what they require. Is that all right? Perfect. Okay, Jenny, are we finished with the work programme?
I think Councillor Heavens raised her hand as well.
Oh, sorry about that. Haven't seen that one. Councillor Heavens.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering whether it's possible to do a review on the international trade and overseas market, how it's been developed, especially with COVID. So it'd be nice to just review that in 2021 and 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Heaven. Believe me, there's quite a few things that need to go on there.
Yes.
And I'm sure we've made a note of that. It definitely will be down for whomever the chair will be to come forward to, pursue these suggested items. We always keep it fluid, and so that we can make sure that everybody gets a chance to scrutinise what they want.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, item 7. There are no other items of public business, I believe, Jenny. Am I right?
Not that we've had come forward.
Perfect. Okay. Right, this concludes the meeting of Scrutiny Board 3, Business, Economy and Enterprise. On behalf of myself and the committee, I would just like to, for all their hard work and commitment, from myself to the committee, since this is my last meeting, I want to thank you for attending and always being there to put forward questions. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Bye now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.